Hey everyone, this is Nitro. In this video, I thought I would cover the 3 new heroes which are coming up with the September 5th update, which are Serena, Wiler, and Gizarof. So, let's start with Serena. And Serena is the SR character of the 3. She is part of the Strategist and Wiler Legends factions. And summed up briefly, in my opinion, she's quite useless. Because she's a tank, and it's very awkward because if you're playing a strategist, you're going to have Vargas, who is by far the superior tank. And if you're playing Wiler Legends, your tank will likely be Landius. So there's basically no reason to build up Serena as a result. I mean, the only reason you would build her up, the way I see it, is if you needed another tank for Guild Wars. Otherwise, I don't see why you would build up Serena. So I'm not even going to talk about details about her because, yeah, that really just sums it up. There's very little reason to build her. Next, let's talk about Wiler. And Wiler is quite an interesting character. He is, once again, part of Strategist and Wiler Legends, just like Serena. But Wiler is actually the first male healer in this game. So all the other healers in the game have been female. His talent is incredibly useful. And it actually makes him a very, very strong healer for PvP. There's several effects. First of all, the first effect is that Wiler has extended range for his support skills. So all his support skills normally have an additional 1 range until he reaches 6 stars. At 6 stars, all of his support skills have 2 additional range. Other than that, he increases the stats of his soldiers by a certain percentage. It starts at 5%, then 10%, then 15%, then 20% additional stats for his soldiers. And his final effect is that when he dies, first of all, he will dispel debuffs from allies within a certain number of blocks from him. So at 6 stars, it's 5 blocks away. At 5 stars and 4 stars, it's 4 blocks away. And then at 3 stars, it's 3 blocks away from him. And in addition, it grants an additional buff for all of these allies. And the buff is that before battle, they will heal 5 times Wiler's intelligence. And this buff lasts for 1 turn at 3 stars, 2 turns at 4 stars and 5 stars, and then 3 turns at 6 stars. So clearly, it's a healer that you need to have built up to 6 stars to be absolutely useful, right? Because then there's 2 extra range, and his buff effect lasts for 3 turns. He's usable at 4 stars and 5 stars, but not as good as him at 6 stars. In terms of skills, he has quite a few of them. He has Dispel, of course, as you can see right here, to help remove the effect of debuffs applied on his party. He has Mass Heal, of course. He has Strengthen and also Mass Attack. He actually has quite a few useful skills in that sense. As for some 2 additional skills he has, which are incredibly useful, is the first one is called Rally. And the way Rally works is when used on a unit that has already finished his turn and the hit points of the soldiers of that character is 0%, that ally can act again. And in addition to that, that ally gets healed for 5 times the caster's intelligence. So it's not easy to use to get the act again effect to trigger, because it's pretty hard to have a character with all the soldiers dead. But what it is great for is comboing it with a Bloodthirster Zerida, right? So that's the best opportunity to use Rally, when you use it with Bloodthirster Zerida. Alright, and another incredibly useful skill for Wiler is a skill that's... I don't know what it's really called, but basically what it does is it will teleport allies within range of the skill who do not have 100% hit points to Wiler. And after the teleportation, it heals them for 3 times the caster's intelligence. So here is a short video demonstrating the use of this skill in PvP, where Wiler teleports almost overextended characters to him. Alright, so that pretty much sums up Wiler. You can see that in terms of direct heal skills, like a basic heal spell that a lot of healers have, like TRS, Lian, and so on, Wiler doesn't really have that. But, you know, the fact that he can teleport allies to him, he can heal them with the rally skill, even if it doesn't let them act again, he has enough heal skills and enough support skills to be very, very useful. And of course, the extended range on his skills definitely helps. So, last but not least, let's talk about Gizarof. And Gizarof is actually a pretty interesting character. You actually, to be fair, the Chinese server doesn't seem to use him that frequently, especially in, I suppose, Season 2. But he does have use. What he has is, he has a summon skill. So the summon skill is useful for turn manipulation in Season 1, right? Because you can end the summon's turn, and that can potentially allow you to move 2 characters in a row at the end of your turn. So being able to create a summon makes him great for Season 1. In addition, he is part of this new faction. I don't really know what it's called. I'll call it Gizarof's faction and the Dark faction, right? So he is the faction buffer for this new faction. And this new faction has a surprising number of characters. For example, characters that belong to it include Bernhard, Jessica, Almeda, Sophia, Juggler, Zerida, Bozel, and Lambda. So this faction is a wide mix of characters, and they're all quite useful and powerful characters too. So that's one major reason to bring Gizarof to the Apex Arena, because of his turn manipulation ability with the summon, as well as his ability to faction buff. In fact, Gizarof's new faction, since Bozel is part of it, it finally allows Bozel to be brought, and he can bring 2 skills instead of basically being forced to always bring a faction buff. So he is really, really useful right off the bat. Even if you're just using him for the faction buff and for the summon, and you're just neglecting his ability to do damage, he still has great utility in that sense. In addition to this, his talent is actually quite interesting. What it does is, first, it increases his own hit points by a certain percentage, right? I think it starts at 10%, then 13%, then 16%, and then ends up at 20% hit point increase. In addition to this, when Gizarof dies, he will summon, he will create a summon. So in some ways, even if he dies, he still allows you to continue to do some turn manipulation with the summon that's available to you. Finally, the interesting, unique part of Gizarof is that whenever he attacks, he can give his summons a buff. And it's a random buff. I think there's 6 or 7 different buffs that these summons can get, right? And the other aspect of this is when he dies and creates a summon, he creates a summon with a certain number of buffs. And the number of buffs depends on his star level, right? At 6 stars, it's 5 buffs. At 5 stars, it's 4 buffs. At 4 stars, it's 3 buffs. And at 3 stars, it's 2 buffs for that summon. So it's quite useful. In terms of what these buffs do, well, for example, one buff gives +1 attack range, so that the summon has 2 attack range instead of being just a melee attacker. Another buff gives the summon 2 mobility, increasing its mobility from 3 to 5. Yet another buff restores the summon's hit points by 40% at the end of each turn. Another buff increases the damage dealt by 40% and reduces the damage taken by 40%. And another buff will allow the summon to apply a random debuff to the enemy before the battle begins. As for the last 2 buffs, the first one allows the unit to deal 0.1 times AoE damage to all nearby enemies within 2 tiles at the end of his turn. So, and the final, so that buff could be useful for, disabling things like Last Rites and disabling Shrine Maidens. And the very last buff is that when the summon is destroyed, it deals 0.2 times damage to all enemies within 2 tiles and removes 2 buffs from all enemies that are hit by this effect. So you can see the summons can be quite useful, right? Turn manipulation is useful, and all the extra effects can make them quite annoying to deal with. So, other than the faction buff and the summon, what else can Gizarof do? Well, he can use AoE attacks, and he can toss out fireballs. That pretty much sums him up in total. So, that really concludes my coverage of these 3 characters. On the whole, I would say Serena is useless. Wiler is a great character at high star levels, right? At 6 stars, he can be an amazing healer for you, but he is the only male healer in the game so far. And finally, Gizarof is a great character even at low star levels, purely for faction buffing and summoning. The higher level he is, the stronger the summons, and similar to higher level he is, the stronger his ability to do ranged attacks and AoE attacks. So that pretty much concludes this video. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you found this information useful. And on that note, Nitro out.